In the grand corridors of Buckingham Palace, where centuries of history whisper through ancient stone walls, the most profound human moments often unfold in the briefest of encounters. A glance held a moment too long, a handshake that carries unspoken meaning, or a simple interaction that reveals more than formal ceremonies ever could. There exists a peculiar magic in these fleeting connections between those born to privilege and those sworn to protect them, a delicate dance of protocol and humanity that plays out daily behind the gilded doors that the public never sees. The year 2026 would witness one such moment that would ripple far beyond the palace walls, challenging perceptions, igniting conversations, and ultimately redefining what it means to serve a crown in the modern age. This is the story of how a single interaction between Queen Camilla and a young royal guard transformed not just their lives, but sparked a global dialogue about duty, dignity, and the unexpected places where true nobility reveals itself. The morning of March 15, 2026, dawned over London with the peculiar grey stillness that characterizes early spring in the British capital. A light mist clung to the Thames, wrapping the city in a soft blanket of moisture that made the historic buildings appear almost ethereal against the pale sky. Inside Buckingham Palace, the day had already begun with its customary precision, the complex machinery of royal life moving with the silent efficiency that had been perfected over generations. Queen Camilla, now in her 8th year as queen consort, had established a routine that balanced the immense responsibilities of her position with the personal warmth that had gradually won over even her most skeptical critics. At 78 years old, she possessed a resilience that belied her age, a quiet determination that had carried her through decades of public scrutiny and private challenges. The Queen's private chambers, located on the 2nd floor of the palace's north wing, offered a panoramic view of the sprawling gardens that had been meticulously maintained since the reign of Queen Victoria. Camilla sat at her antique writing desk, a magnificent piece of Georgian craftsmanship that had once belonged to Queen Adelaide, reviewing the day's schedule with her private secretary, Sarah Hamilton. The morning's engagements included a reception for Commonwealth ambassadors, a lunch with representatives from various charitable organizations, and an afternoon appearance at a children's hospital in East London. The weight of these responsibilities pressed upon her shoulders, but she had long ago learned to carry such burdens with grace. "Your Majesty, the garden party has been moved to the ballroom due to the weather forecast," Sarah announced, her tone professional yet carrying the warmth of years of faithful service. "The Met Office predicts rain by mid-afternoon." Camilla nodded thoughtfully, her fingers absently touching the pearls at her throat. "That's a pity. The gardens are particularly lovely this time of year. The daffodils have been magnificent." She paused, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Still, the ballroom will serve well enough. Please ensure the flowers are arranged appropriately. I want our guests to feel welcomed, not inconvenienced." "Yes, Your Majesty. I've already informed the floral team." Sarah made a notation on her tablet. "Also, the new security rotation begins today. Colonel Harrison has requested a moment of your time to introduce the latest additions to the palace guard." Camilla raised an eyebrow, her expression indicating mild curiosity. The palace security was a constant presence in her life, a necessity that she had accepted with philosophical resignation. Over the years, she had developed relationships with many of the guards, learning their names, their family backgrounds, their hopes and fears. It was a small kindness that she extended deliberately, understanding that these men and women dedicated their lives to protecting her family, often at great personal sacrifice. "Very well," she said, rising from her desk with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to being observed. "I shall meet with him in the yellow drawing room in 30 minutes. That should give me time to finish correspondence." The next half hour passed in the comfortable rhythm of routine. Camilla reviewed letters from school children, dictated responses to various official documents, and made a brief telephone call to her daughter, Laura, who was dealing with a minor family crisis involving one of her children. The conversation was warm and maternal, a reminder that beneath the crown and ceremony, she was first and foremost a mother and grandmother. When the time came for her meeting with Colonel Harrison, she straightened her dress, a simple but elegant navy blue ensemble, and made her way through the palace corridors with the ease of someone who had walked those halls thousands of times. The yellow drawing room glowed with the warmth of morning light filtering through its tall windows, illuminating the delicate silk wallpaper and the collection of priceless artwork that adorned the walls. Colonel Harrison stood at attention near the fireplace, his military bearing impeccable despite his advancing years. Beside him stood a young man, barely out of his teens, whose uniform seemed to wear him rather than the other way around. The boy's face was pale beneath his bearskin cap, his hands trembling almost imperceptibly at his sides. "Your Majesty," Colonel Harrison began, his voice carrying the authoritative tone of a career military officer. "May I present Guardsman Thomas Ashworth, newly assigned to the Palace Guard. He's completed his training with distinction and will be serving on the royal rotation." Camilla's eyes settled on the young man, and something in her expression softened. She had seen countless young soldiers pass through these halls, their faces a mixture of pride and nervousness, their futures stretching before them like uncharted territory. But there was something different about this boy, a vulnerability in his eyes that suggested he was carrying weight far heavier than his ceremonial rifle. "Guardsman Ashworth," she said, her voice gentle but regal, "welcome to Buckingham Palace. I hope you'll find your service here rewarding." Thomas Ashworth struggled to meet her gaze, his voice cracking slightly as he responded, "Thank you, Your Majesty. It's an honor." The words came out as barely a whisper, and he immediately flushed with embarrassment at his own nervousness. Camilla noticed the reaction and felt a pang of sympathy. She remembered her own early days in the public eye, the crushing weight of being scrutinized by millions, the fear of making a misstep that would be dissected by the media for days. "Please, there's no need to be nervous," she said, stepping closer to him. "We're all human here, regardless of our titles." She extended her hand in a gesture of warmth that was entirely her own, not the formal handshake of protocol but something more personal. "I understand you're from Lancashire. My grandmother was from Lancashire. It's a beautiful part of the country." Thomas's eyes widened in surprise, the formality of the moment momentarily forgotten. "Yes, Your Majesty. From a small village near Blackburn. It's very different from London." "I can imagine," Camilla replied, her smile genuine. "But I hope you'll come to love this city as much as I do. It has a way of growing on you, even when you least expect it." Colonel Harrison watched the exchange with a mixture of approval and curiosity. He had seen many guards interact with royalty over the years, but there was something unusual about this particular moment. The Queen seemed to be making a deliberate effort to connect with this young man, to bridge the vast gap between their stations. It was a kindness that went beyond mere politeness, and he found himself wondering what had prompted it. "I'll leave you to your duties, Colonel," Camilla said, turning back to the officer. "And Guardsman Ashworth, I look forward to seeing you at the palace. If you ever need anything at all, please don't hesitate to let someone know. We take care of our own here." With that, she swept from the room, leaving Thomas and Colonel Harrison alone in the golden morning light. The young guard stood frozen for a moment, processing what had just happened. He had expected a brief, formal introduction, a moment of protocol that would be quickly forgotten. Instead, he had been treated like a human being, seen not as a uniform but as a person with a history and a story. "That was unexpected," Colonel Harrison said, breaking the silence. "The Queen doesn't usually engage with new guards like that. Consider yourself fortunate, Ashworth." Thomas nodded slowly, still trying to make sense of the encounter. She was very kind. He managed, his voice still carrying a tremor of emotion. "I didn't expect her to be so genuine." "She's a remarkable woman," Colonel Harrison agreed. "Now let's get you to your post. You've got a long day ahead of you." As Thomas took his position outside the palace gates, his mind kept returning to those few moments in the yellow drawing room. The Queen's words echoed in his ears, her kindness a balm to the anxiety that had been eating at him for weeks. He had joined the army to escape a difficult home situation, hoping that the structure and discipline of military life would provide the stability he so desperately craved. His father had died when he was 12, leaving his mother to raise 3 children on a meager income. Thomas had been the eldest, shouldering responsibilities that no child should have to bear. The army had seemed like an escape, a way to build a future for himself while honoring his family's legacy of service. But the reality of army life had been more challenging than he had anticipated. The rigorous training, the constant pressure, the loneliness of being far from everything familiar, all of it had combined to create a simmering anxiety that he struggled to contain. His mother had been so proud when he received his assignment to the palace guard, seeing it as proof that her sacrifices had been worthwhile. Thomas had smiled for her sake, but inside he was terrified. The weight of expectations, both his own and those of his family, pressed down on him like a physical burden. As the morning wore on, Thomas maintained his stoic position, his face an expressionless mask as tourists and officials passed by. The bearskin cap was heavy on his head, the ceremonial rifle a constant reminder of the responsibility he bore. But beneath the immaculate uniform, his heart raced with a nervous energy that he couldn't seem to shake. The Queen's words had touched something deep within him, a well of emotion that he had kept carefully sealed for years. For the first time in a long while, he felt seen, not as a uniform, not as a soldier, but as a person with a story worth telling. Little did he know that this brief encounter was only the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything he thought he knew about duty, service, and the true meaning of nobility. The seeds of a transformation had been planted in the yellow drawing room, and they would grow in ways that nobody could have predicted. The weeks that followed Thomas's introduction to the Queen were marked by a subtle but unmistakable shift in the atmosphere of the palace. The young guardsman quickly proved himself capable and diligent, his training evident in every precise movement and respectful interaction. Yet there was something about him that set him apart from his fellow guards, a quiet intensity, a watchfulness that seemed to go beyond mere duty. He observed everything with an attention to detail that bordered on the obsessive, his eyes constantly scanning the crowds that gathered near the palace gates, his body always tensed for a threat that never came. Colonel Harrison noticed the change immediately, recognizing in Thomas the signs of a soldier who was struggling with more than just the demands of the job. The boy was too quiet, too serious, his smiles too rare and too quickly suppressed. It was as if he was constantly fighting a battle within himself, a war that had nothing to do with the ceremonial duties he performed each day. The colonel made a mental note to keep a closer eye on the young guardsman, sensing that something was amiss beneath the polished surface of military discipline. Meanwhile, the Queen had not forgotten her brief conversation with Thomas. She had developed a habit of observing the guards during her daily walks through the palace, noting their demeanors, their interactions with tourists and staff, their general well-being. It was a small concern, perhaps, but one that she took seriously. These men and women gave their lives to the protection of the crown, and she felt a deep responsibility to ensure they were treated with dignity and respect. One afternoon in early April, as the first signs of spring began to transform the palace gardens into a riot of color, Camilla found herself walking toward the guard station near the grand entrance. She had just finished a meeting with representatives from the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, a charity that held particular significance for her given her long-standing commitment to animal welfare. The meeting had been productive, but something nagged at her mind, an image that kept returning to her thoughts despite her best efforts to focus on the business at hand. It was the look in Thomas's eyes during their initial meeting, that mixture of desperation and hope that had touched something deep within her. She had seen that look before, in the faces of soldiers returning from conflict zones, in the eyes of people who had lost everything and were struggling to rebuild their lives. It was the look of someone who was holding on by the thinnest of threads, a silent cry for help that had gone unnoticed by everyone else. Approaching the guard station, Camilla saw Thomas standing at attention, his face as impassive as ever. But she noticed the slight tremor in his hands, the barely perceptible tension in his shoulders. He was struggling, she realized, and the weight of his struggles was becoming increasingly difficult to bear. "Guardsman Ashworth," she said, her voice carrying the warmth of genuine concern. "I was hopping to have a word with you if you have a moment." Thomas's eyes widened in surprise, his military training warring with his natural inclination to flee from such unexpected attention. "Of course, Your Majesty," he replied, his voice steady despite the sudden acceleration of his heartbeat. She led him to a small alcove near the guard station, a quiet corner where they could speak without being overheard. The stone walls provided a sense of privacy, a temporary refuge from the constant scrutiny of palace life. "I've noticed you seem troubled, Thomas," she said, using his first name deliberately. "Is there something you'd like to talk about?" For a moment, Thomas considered deflecting, offering the standard response of a soldier who had been trained to keep his feelings to himself. But something in the Queen's manner, the genuine concern in her eyes, the gentle patience in her voice, made him reconsider. "It's complicated, Your Majesty," he said slowly. "I don't want to burden you with my problems." "Thomas, I've spent my entire adult life in the public eye," Camilla said with a slight smile. "I've been burdened with far more than you could possibly imagine, and I've learned that sometimes the best way to lighten a burden is to share it with someone who cares." She paused, her eyes searching his. "I care, Thomas. I want to help you if I can." The words hung in the air between them, a bridge of trust that Thomas had never expected to cross. He took a deep breath, his military composure finally crumbling under the weight of years of suppressed emotion. "My mother is sick," he said, the words coming out in a rush. "She's been diagnosed with cancer and I can't afford the treatments. My brothers are too young to help, and my salary barely covers my own expenses, let alone medical bills. I've been working extra shifts, doing whatever I can, but it's not enough." Camilla's face registered the impact of his words, her expression softening with profound sympathy. "I'm so sorry, Thomas. That must be incredibly difficult for you. Have you looked into any of the military assistance programs? There are resources available for soldiers in situations like yours." "I've tried, Your Majesty," Thomas replied, his voice cracking slightly. "But the waiting lists are long and the process is complicated. My mother's condition is progressing more quickly than the system can keep up with." He paused, wiping a tear from his eye with the back of his hand. "I feel so helpless. I joined the army to make a difference, to help people, and now I can't even help my own mother." The Queen was silent for a long moment, her mind working through the implications of what she had just heard. She had encountered many forms of suffering during her years of public service, but there was something particularly poignant about this young soldier's struggle. He had given his life to the protection of the crown, and now the crown had an opportunity to give back. "Thomas, I want you to know that you're not alone in this," she said firmly. "I'll make some inquiries, see if I can expedite the process, and I'll ensure that your mother receives the care she needs, regardless of the bureaucratic obstacles." Thomas stared at her, his mouth agape. "Your Majesty, I couldn't possibly accept." "Nonsense," Camilla interrupted, her tone brooking no argument. "This is what the royal family is for. We're meant to serve the people, not just be served by them. Your mother raised a wonderful son who's dedicated his life to protecting others. The least we can do is protect her in return." The tears that Thomas had been fighting finally spilled over, streaming down his face in an uncontrollable torrent. He tried to speak, to express the depth of his gratitude, but the words wouldn't come. All the years of worry, of sleepless nights and desperate prayers, seemed to flood out of him in that moment, leaving him feeling simultaneously exhausted and relieved. Camilla placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, her touch light but reassuring. "Take all the time you need," she said softly. "There's no rush. We have all the time in the world." What Thomas didn't know was that this moment of compassion would set in motion a chain of events that would reverberate far beyond the walls of Buckingham Palace. The Queen's intervention on his behalf was just the beginning of a deeper transformation, one that would challenge the very foundations of how the royal family interacted with its employees and the public at large. But for now, in that quiet alcove, two people from vastly different worlds shared a moment of profound human connection, a reminder that beneath the titles and ceremonies, we are all bound by the same hopes and fears, the same joys and sorrows. The news of the Queen's personal involvement in Thomas's family situation spread quickly through the palace, as such news inevitably does. Reactions were mixed. Some saw it as a genuine act of compassion, a testament to Camilla's character and her commitment to the people she served. Others viewed it with skepticism, questioning the appropriateness of a monarch's direct intervention in such personal matters. There were whispers about favoritism, about the dangers of blurring the lines between professional duty and personal attachment. Colonel Harrison, for his part, was deeply conflicted. He had served the crown for over 30 years, and he understood better than most the importance of maintaining proper boundaries. The Queen's actions, however well-intentioned, threatened to disrupt the careful balance of palace protocol. He called Thomas into his office for a private conversation, his expression stern but not unkind. "Ashworth, I've heard about the Queen's interest in your family situation," he began, his voice measured. "I want you to understand that I don't condone the use of personal relationships to gain favor within the palace. The Queen's kindness is a gift, not a right. Don't let it go to your head." Thomas nodded, his face flushing with embarrassment. "I understand, sir. I never intended to create any kind of impropriety. The Queen approached me, not the other way around." "I'm aware of that," Colonel Harrison replied, his tone softening slightly. "And I've known Queen Camilla long enough to recognize genuine compassion when I see it. She's a good woman, Ashworth, but she's also the Queen, and her actions have consequences that ripple through the entire institution. Be careful how you navigate this, for her sake as well as your own." The warning hung in the air between them, a reminder of the delicate dance that governed life within the palace walls. Thomas left the colonel's office with a heavy heart, his mind churning with conflicting emotions. He was grateful for the Queen's intervention, more grateful than he could possibly express. But he also understood the risks involved in being singled out for such extraordinary treatment. He was a guardsman, nothing more. And guardsmen were expected to blend into the background, not draw attention to themselves. Yet even as these concerns weighed on his mind, Thomas couldn't deny the feeling of hope that had begun to bloom in his chest. For the first time in months, he could see a future beyond the crushing weight of his mother's illness. The Queen's promise of assistance had lifted a burden that he had been carrying alone for too long, and the relief was almost overwhelming. In the days that followed, Thomas threw himself into his duties with renewed vigor, determined to prove himself worthy of the Queen's trust. He patrolled the palace grounds with unwavering attention, greeted visitors with genuine warmth, and maintained the impeccable standards that were expected of a royal guard. But beneath the surface, something was changing. The compassion he had received had awakened a new purpose within him, a desire to give back to others the kindness he had been shown. He began volunteering at a local veterans center in his spare time, offering support to soldiers who were struggling with the transition to civilian life. He wrote letters to his mother, sharing his hopes and fears, the details of his daily life that he had previously kept to himself. And he started a small fund within the palace, encouraging other guards to contribute a portion of their wages to help colleagues in need. The Queen, learning of these initiatives through her network of palace informants, felt a deep sense of pride in the young guardsman. She had seen something special in him from the very beginning, a spark of resilience and determination that had been obscured by his struggles. Now that spark was beginning to kindle into a flame, illuminating the path toward a brighter future. "Tell me, Sarah," she said to her private secretary one evening, "do you remember Thomas Ashworth, the young guard I met a few weeks ago?" Sarah looked up from her notes, her expression thoughtful. "Yes, Your Majesty, the young man from Lancashire. I heard you were instrumental in helping his mother." "Don't be dramatic," Camilla replied with a slight smile. "I merely made a few telephone calls, but what interests me is what he's been doing since then. The man has a genuine talent for bringing people together. I'm curious to see how far he can go." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting nothing," Camilla said firmly. "I'm simply observing. Sometimes the best thing a leader can do is plant a seed and let it grow on its own." She paused, her gaze distant. "But I do have a feeling that we haven't seen the last of Guardsman Ashworth, not by a long shot." By mid-spring, the transformation in Thomas Ashworth had become impossible to ignore. The young guard who had once seemed so overwhelmed by his circumstances had evolved into a confident, capable soldier who moved through his duties with a sense of purpose that bordered on the inspirational. His colleagues noticed the change first, the way he smiled more readily, the genuine warmth in his interactions, the willingness to go above and beyond in service to the crown and its people. Colonel Harrison, who had initially been skeptical of the Queen's personal interest in the young guardsman, found himself reassessing his position. There was something special about Thomas Ashworth, something that transcended the ordinary boundaries of military service. The Queen's intervention on behalf of Thomas's mother had been remarkably effective. Within weeks of their conversation, specialist doctors had been arranged, a treatment plan had been implemented, and the financial burden that had been crushing the Ashworth family had been lifted. Thomas's mother, Margaret, was responding well to the treatment, and the prognosis had shifted from grim to cautiously optimistic. For the first time in years, the Ashworth family could look toward the future with hope rather than dread. Thomas had expressed his gratitude to the Queen in a heartfelt letter, but words seemed inadequate to convey the depth of his appreciation. He had been given a second chance, not just for his mother, but for himself. The weight that had pressed down on his shoulders for so long had been lifted, leaving him free to embrace the opportunities that lay before him, and he was determined to make the most of every single one. It was during one of the Queen's regular walks through the palace gardens that Thomas had his next encounter with Camilla, an encounter that would prove to be pivotal in ways neither of them could have anticipated. The gardens were at their peak of spring beauty, the air heavy with the scent of blooming roses and freshly cut grass. Camilla had been feeling the weight of her responsibilities more acutely than usual, the endless demands of public life pressing down on her in ways that even her resilience could not fully counter. She had slipped away from her schedule for a few moments of solitude, hoping that the peace of the gardens would restore her spirits. Instead, she found Thomas Ashworth, off-duty but still in uniform, sitting on a bench near the rose garden. He was writing in a small notebook, his brow furrowed in concentration. Camilla hesitated for a moment, not wanting to intrude on his private time, but something about the scene drew her forward. A curiosity about the young man who had so unexpectedly captured her attention. "Thomas," she said softly, announcing her presence, "I hope I'm not interrupting." Thomas looked up, his face breaking into a wide smile at the sight of the Queen. "Your Majesty, no, of course not, I was just writing some letters home." He closed the notebook, his cheeks flushing slightly. "I wanted to tell my mother about the garden. She's never been able to visit London, and I thought the descriptions might bring her some joy." Camilla felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. "That's very thoughtful of you, Thomas. Your mother is lucky to have such a caring son." She gestured to the empty space beside him. "May I join you for a moment?" "Of course, Your Majesty," Thomas replied, immediately rising to offer her the seat. She waved him back down, settling herself on the bench with the ease of someone who had long ago grown accustomed to unconventional seating arrangements. "Please, sit. I wanted to talk to you about something. The palace is considering a new initiative to support our employees and their families. I've been thinking about your situation, and I believe you have insights that could be invaluable." Thomas's eyes widened in surprise. "Me, Your Majesty. I'm just a guard. I don't have any experience with policy or administration." "Nonsense," Camilla said firmly. "Experience isn't the only qualification for insight. You've lived through the challenges that our employees face. You understand the fear, the uncertainty, the desperation that comes with not knowing how to protect the people you love. That understanding is far more valuable than any policy manual." She paused, her eyes searching his. "Would you be willing to help me? To serve as a representative for the men and women who dedicate their lives to this palace?" Thomas was silent for a long moment, processing the enormity of the request. He had never imagined that his experiences could be of any use to anyone beyond his immediate family. The idea that he could make a difference, that he could help others who were facing the same struggles he had overcome, was almost overwhelming. "I don't know what to say, Your Majesty," he finally managed. "I'm honored, truly honored, but I'm not sure I'm qualified for such a responsibility." "Qualification is overrated," Camilla said with a slight smile. "Character, compassion, and the willingness to learn, these are the qualities that truly matter, and you have all three in abundance." She reached out and placed a hand on his arm, her touch light but reassuring. "Will you help me, Thomas? Will you be the voice for those who have no voice of their own?" The tears that had been forming in Thomas's eyes spilled over, but this time they were tears of joy rather than despair. "Yes, Your Majesty," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I'll help. I'll do whatever I can." And so began Thomas's unexpected journey from palace guard to advocate. The Queen's initiative, which would eventually become known as the Royal Support Network, was designed to provide financial assistance, mental health resources, and career development opportunities for palace employees and their families. Thomas was appointed as a junior advisor to the program, his role to ensure that the voices of the guards and servants were heard, that their needs were addressed, that their struggles were acknowledged. The palace staff, initially skeptical of the new program, gradually warmed to it as they saw the genuine impact it was having on their lives. Thomas became a familiar figure in the corridors, his friendly demeanor and genuine concern earning him the respect of even the most cynical employees. He conducted regular meetings with staff members, listening to their concerns, documenting their needs, and advocating for change at the highest levels of palace administration. The Queen, for her part, watched Thomas's progress with a mixture of pride and admiration. She had seen something in the young guard from their very first meeting, a spark of potential that had now blossomed into a full flame. He had the rare gift of bringing people together, of finding common ground where others saw only division. It was a talent that would serve him well in the years to come. But not everyone was pleased with the changes that were taking place within the palace. There were those who felt that the traditional boundaries of royal life were being eroded, that the introduction of such programs undermined the dignity of the institution. Lord Pembroke, a senior member of the royal household who had served the crown for over 40 years, was one of the most vocal critics. He had watched the Queen's growing involvement with Thomas Ashworth with increasing alarm, convinced that the young guardsman's influence was corrupting the very foundations of palace protocol. "I must speak with you, Your Majesty," Lord Pembroke said one afternoon, his voice carrying the weight of years of service. "I have concerns about the direction of the palace's affairs, concerns that I believe need to be addressed before it's too late." Camilla sighed, recognizing the familiar tone of a man who was about to lecture her on matters of tradition and propriety. "Very well, Lord Pembroke. What is it that troubles you so deeply?" "The guardsman, Thomas Ashworth," Lord Pembroke replied, his voice dripping with disapproval. "His influence is growing far beyond what is appropriate for someone of his station. I've heard he's been meeting with staff members, conducting surveys, even suggesting changes to the palace's operational procedures. This is not acceptable, Your Majesty. It undermines the hierarchy that has served the crown for generations. Lord Pembroke, I appreciate your concern, Camilla said, her voice calm but firm. But I hired Thomas Ashworth to do precisely what he's doing. He's representing the interests of the palace staff, ensuring that their voices are heard. If that makes you uncomfortable, I suggest you examine your own reasons for being uncomfortable. Perhaps you'll find that it's not Thomas Ashworth who is the problem, but the system that has been allowed to perpetuate inequality and suffering for far too long. Lord Pembroke's face reddened with indignation. Your Majesty, I've served this family for 40 years. I've seen monarchs come and go, and I've always acted in the best interests of the crown. If you're suggesting that my motives are anything less than pure, I take great offense. I'm not suggesting anything, Lord Pembroke, Camilla replied, her tone still calm but carrying an edge of steel. I'm simply asking you to consider the possibility that change can be a good thing, that the institution we all serve might be strengthened, not weakened, by embracing the values of compassion and inclusion. She paused, her eyes meeting his. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting with Thomas Ashworth in 10 minutes. He's presenting a report on employee satisfaction, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing what he has to say. The Queen's determination to support Thomas had now become a matter of principle, a stand against the rigid traditions that had long governed the palace. She saw in the young guard a symbol of hope, a reminder that even the most powerful institutions could evolve and adapt to the changing times. And she was determined to see his influence grow, to challenge the old guard and create a palace that truly served the people who inhabited its hallowed halls. The summer of 2026 brought with it a heat wave that had London sweltering in unprecedented temperatures. The palace, with its thick stone walls and ancient cooling systems, struggled to maintain a comfortable environment for its inhabitants. Thomas Ashworth, now a familiar figure in the corridors of power, had been working tirelessly on the Royal Support Network, his efforts culminating in a series of recommendations that would reshape the way the palace supported its employees. But the challenges of the present were overshadowed by a new development, one that would test the resilience of everyone involved in ways that nobody could have predicted. Margaret Ashworth, Thomas's mother, had been making steady progress in her battle against cancer. The treatment that the Queen's intervention had made possible was working, and the doctors were optimistic about her long-term prognosis. For Thomas, it was a source of profound relief and gratitude. He had begun to allow himself to imagine a future where his mother could live a full and healthy life, where his family could be whole again. But fate, as it so often does, had other plans. In the midst of the heat wave, Thomas received a desperate telephone call from his younger brother, William. The news was devastating. Their mother had suffered a sudden setback, a complication that had sent her back to the hospital in critical condition. The doctors were doing everything they could, but the prognosis was grim. Thomas's world came crashing down around him in a single, terrible moment. He was at his post when the call came, maintaining his stoic composure even as his heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. The Queen, passing through the corridor on her way to a meeting, noticed the change in his demeanor immediately. His face was pale, his hands trembling, his eyes glazed with unshed tears. She approached him with the gentle concern that had become characteristic of their interactions. "Thomas, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice soft but urgent. "You look like you've seen a ghost." He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. The weight of his grief was too heavy, too overwhelming. Finally, he managed to choke out the truth. "My mother, she's taken a turn for the worse. The doctors don't think she'll make it through the night." Camilla's face registered the impact of his words, her expression softening with profound sympathy. "Oh, Thomas, I'm so sorry." She reached out and took his hand, her grip steady and reassuring. "You need to go to her. Now, I'll arrange transportation, make sure you get there as quickly as possible." "I can't leave my post, Your Majesty," Thomas protested, his voice cracking with emotion. "I have a duty." "Duty be damned," Camilla said, her voice carrying a force that silenced any further argument. "Your family needs you. That's more important than any protocol, any tradition, any ceremony. Go, I'll handle the arrangements. You focus on being with your mother." The next few hours were a blur of frantic activity. Thomas was whisked away from the palace in a royal car, the Queen's personal driver navigating the congested London streets with skill and urgency. The journey to the hospital in Blackburn seemed to take an eternity, each passing moment stretching into an agonizing eternity. Thomas's mind raced with possibilities, his heart heavy with the weight of what he might find when he arrived. His mother was unconscious when he reached her bedside, her frail body connected to an array of monitors and tubes that beeped and hummed with mechanical indifference. Thomas took her hand, the same hand that had held him as a child, that had guided him through the difficult years after his father's death, that had never stopped believing in him even when he had stopped believing in himself. "Please, Mum," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Please don't leave me. I'm not ready to let you go, not yet." The hours passed in a blur of medical interventions and desperate prayers. Thomas never left his mother's side, holding her hand, speaking to her of memories and hopes, of the future they had planned together. The Queen, learning of the severity of the situation from her staff, made arrangements for Margaret to be transferred to a specialist facility in London, where the best doctors in the country would have access to the most advanced treatments available. It was an extraordinary gesture of compassion, one that went far beyond the boundaries of royal protocol. But Margaret Ashworth was not meant to survive. In the early hours of the morning, as the first light of dawn began to filter through the hospital windows, she passed away peacefully, her son's hand clasped tightly in hers. Thomas felt the moment of her departure like a physical blow, the loss of his mother leaving a void that could never be filled. He sat by her bedside for hours, unable to move, unable to speak, his grief a crushing weight that threatened to overwhelm him. Back at the palace, the Queen received the news with a heavy heart. She had come to care for Thomas deeply, viewing him not just as an employee but as a member of her extended family. The loss of his mother was a tragedy that touched her personally, a reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of cherishing every moment with those we love. "Sarah, I need you to make some arrangements," Camilla said to her private secretary, her voice subdued. "Thomas Ashworth's mother has passed away. I want the palace to cover all funeral expenses, and I want to attend the service myself if the family would have me." Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. "Your Majesty, are you sure that's appropriate? The security implications alone." "I don't care about the security implications," Camilla interrupted, her voice firm. "This is a matter of humanity. Thomas has been through so much and he's never asked for anything in return. The least I can do is pay my respects to his mother." She paused, her gaze distant. "She raised a remarkable son. She deserves to be honored for that." The news of the Queen's intention to attend the funeral spread quickly through the palace, igniting a fire.